Well, hello and welcome to our next class of the Neighborhood Bird Project. It's good to see you all here. Today we're going to be learning about swift swallows and thrushes. This class is being recorded on April 5th, and the swallows are already here in Seattle. We've got reports of violet greens and tree swallows, and possibly a northern rough-winged as well. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll get right at it.
And barn.
Oh, and barn swallow too? Yeah, okay. Okay, so we're going to start with a tree swallow, which in my experience is the first swallow to return. Dennis Paulson, my mentor and teacher of Master Birder class, insists that violet greens return first at Montlake Phil. I think it's the tree swallows that return first, and then the violet greens shortly thereafter. So this is a very typical view of a tree swallow. Let's go through some of the field marks. These tree swallows will appear over water and also over open fields and whatnot. So they're a common swallow. And let me backtrack a little bit and say that we have 6 swallow species in Western Washington, plus a 7th, which is the purple martin. And the way I think of them altogether is there are 2 swallows that have spanking white undercarriages. That's the violet green and the tree swallow. There are 2 swallows that have beigey browny undercarriages. That's the barn swallow and the cliff swallow. And then there are 2 swallows that have kind of a dirty white undercarriage, and that's the bank swallow and the northern rough-winged swallow. So it's helpful, I think, when you're trying to see and identify swallows in flight. They're very fast. You have to have quick eyes. It's a good idea, I think, to start with the undercarriage rather than the bill, which is what I usually tell you to do, is to look at the bill first. But these birds are flying so fast and their bills are so hard to see, and they're not diagnostic, so it's not helpful in this case to bother too much with them. But instead, the first and easiest thing to see is what do their undersides look like from the chin all the way down through the breast, the belly, and the undertail coverts. And as I said, then if you can determine whether they're spanking white, dirty white, or beigey browny, then you eliminate almost every possibility and usually only have to worry about 2 species, which is extremely helpful. So we're going to do the spanking white birds first, and this is the first one, the tree swallow. So let's start at the head, and you notice that it's electric blue from the just above the forehead here. There's a little bit of a black, but you can't see that in flight. And that same electric blue goes all the way down the crown through the nape and in the back and on into the rump. And then there's a black mask around the eye as well. That can be very hard to see unless you're in good light and you've got good eyes, quick eyes. But it is there. Otherwise, it's white from the chin all the way down to the undertail coverts. The wings primaries are this sort of a charcoaly black color. One of the good things to notice about this bird is that the blue is iridescent. So the color is supplied not by pigment. The pigment is in the black mask and in the primaries here, but the blue color is supplied by the feather structure. So if you were to examine these feathers under a microscope, you would see that they have little prisms, and the prisms refract light in such a way that they break it up. They break up the constituent wavelengths of light, and what they refract back to our eyes appears blue. Same thing happens with air molecules making the sky look blue. So that's an important thing to remember with these tree swallows. It will be very important when we compare them to other swallows in a little bit. So here's another view. So once again, we have this blue on the forehead, all the way up through the crown, back to the nape, the back, and all the way to the rump here. Otherwise, very white underneath. Here's another view. Notice the wings are very long. That's quite typical of swallows. So tree swallows nest in holes in trees, and they're cavity nesters. They cannot make their own holes, so they're dependent on finding old woodpecker holes. Here's what the front looks like. You can see this iridescent blue here. It's thought that one reason why they can return earlier in the spring when it can still be quite cold and sometimes even snowy is that if conditions get too harsh, they can go into their hollow trees and get away from the weather and stay warm. Here's a close-up of the face of one. So one of the things I want you to notice is regardless of whether you can see the black mask and the blue and distinguish those two colors, what you can see in any light at all is that the head is, or I should say the face is kind of divided in half. This dark color, whether it's black or if you think it's blue, whatever you see in the field, comes just below the eye, and then the rest of the face below that is all white. So it's kind of like a half and half sort of face. Here's what one looks like in flight from above, and you can see here's the pigmented primaries and secondaries and tertials. They're just kind of this charcoaly gray color. The shoulders here are that iridescent blue. So here's the blue starting from the forehead and going straight back all the way to the rump. Now notice in this picture here that there is a kind of a white, what we call a saddle, that comes up on top of the rump, but not very far. So this is a diagnostic field mark for tree swallows. This amount of color from one part of the saddle to the other side is pretty wide. It looks almost like a straight line from the back. We'll see with the violet-green swallows that is not the case. That this amount of color right here is quite narrow, so that is a diagnostic difference. So in terms of telling tree swallows apart from violet greens, there are three things to pay attention to. One is the face, and here we have this divided face, dark on top, halfway, and white below. And another is the iridescent blue, this sort of electric blue of all the upper parts here outside of the wings, and then this saddle area here and rump area. So those are the three important field marks to look at as these birds are swirling around. Here's what the underside looks like, and you can see how white it is from the chin clear through to the undertail coverts. Here's the face divided in half, dark on top, white below. When the young hatch out and start flying around after they've fledged, they're actually brown. So this brown color is the underlying substrate below the prisms of these birds' feathers. And it's the feather wear that wears away whatever pigment there is, and eventually these birds will refract back blue. But in their early days, which this would be, I'm going to say like August or so, they're going to look brown. And one of the important things for you to notice, this is why I was mentioning the iridescence, is that even when these young first-year birds are flying around looking brown, the brown is iridescent brown. You can kind of see that hint here of iridescence. That's very different from the other two brown, upper part brown swallows, which are the bank swallow and the northern rough-winged swallow. So even when they're in this brown state, you can still see that there's iridescence there. And otherwise, they're the same as the adults. It's half face, dark on top, white below, and then this kind of straight-edged brown color from the back clear through to the rump and onto the tail, and then these white saddles that do come up on the sides, but not very far. So tree swallow. Here's another brown one, which this one doesn't look very iridescent, does it? That's got to be a camera problem. Believe me, they are iridescent brown. Okay, here's the second swallow that is spanking white on the undercarriage, and that's the violet-green swallow. And as I said, these birds arrive almost at the same time as the tree swallows, within a matter of days, really. So they're both here now. But look how different they are from the tree swallow. So we start with the forehead here, never mind about the bill. And we notice it's this Kelly green from the forehead clear through to the nape and then onto the back. This Kelly green is just so, so beautiful. The face is really very different from the tree swallow face. It's got this kind of sea around, a sea of white around its eye. And the lore here can be white or it can be kind of this sort of mushy grayish color too. It looks white in flight oftentimes. So they have a very white face. And their face is not divided in half, dark on top and white below, but instead they've got this amount of white that comes way up above the eye and all the way behind the eye. So that's a diagnostic difference between the tree swallow and the violet green swallow. And then you go on down through the rest of them and you see this is where it gets its name, violet green. The rump is violet. That can be extremely difficult to see in the wild as these birds are flying around. You have to have good light and you have to look for it. But I would urge you to put your binoculars on these birds and track them around as they swirl through the air. And if it's a sunny day, look for that violet rump. It's really quite lovely. Here's what
Hey,
this bird, yeah?
can I interrupt? Sorry. Do you have a sound file for the tree swallow?
I'm sorry, do I have a what?
Do you have a sound file for the tree swallow, or are you going to do those
No,
later?
I'm not gonna do the songs for the swallows. They're too similar, and I don't think they're going to be diagnostically helpful to you.
Okay.
So I'm not going to do those. When we come to the thrushes, I'll do them. But with the swallows, I think you're better off with visually identifying them. I could play a tree swallow song. You want me to? I can try to even find one. Let's see if I can find one. Bird
I mean, I
song.
think that would be helpful just because when they're in flight, they're moving so fast that I find that they're also vocalizing. So I would like to use that as an indicator, but I understand that it's probably pretty specific.
Well, I don't even know if I have any like here that are. I have to go to the um, Macaulay master set and find tree swallow. All right, I'll do it. Oop, I went past it. It's hard to do this tree swallow. So that's the tree swallow, and then let's see if we can find violet green here. Here's another one. A little bit slower, maybe, and higher pitched. Oh, that's not slow. So, was that helpful or not? I'm biased, as you know, with these songs. I have such a hard time with them that I tend not to depend on them, especially when they sound similar like that to me. But anyhow, yes, there you go.
Thanks.
Here's a back view of a violet green swallow. You can see these long wings and this Kelly green back. It's somewhat iridescent too. You can see that this looks like sort of olive, but honestly, most of the time I see it in color, it's Kelly green. Then here's the violet rump. Here's that kind of mushy grayish at the lower, but the whole face really looks more white. Here's the undercarriage here. The females, here's another one. Here you see that Kelly green. Wow. The females tend to have a little bit mushier, kind of grayish, brownish behind the eye, so their sea of white is not as apparent, but usually you can still see it. So it's the violet green. So these are cavity nesters also. There's the face. What a bird, wow. And here's the two of them together. So you can see here's the tree swallow on the left with the face divided, dark on top all the way to the crown and white below, and not the case with the violet green has this white face. Those are two big differences. But here's another big difference. So here's one. This is a violet green swallow, a swallow flying, and you can see here this the saddle of white comes way up. I don't look at the saddle of white. That doesn't help me. Instead, what I look at is the rump color, the color that goes from the back through the rump to the almost to the tail here, and it gets very thin and narrow where the saddle is. Whereas if you remember with the tree swallow, it was almost straight across here. So I'll show you another picture of that pretty soon. But that's diagnostic. So when you're trying to identify swallows in flight, what I do is I pick one and I just kind of track it with my binoculars until it shows me what I need to see in order to tell what it is. So once I look at the undertail or the undercarriage parts. Is it spanking white? Yes, no. If yes, then is it a tree swallow or a violet green? And then I start at the face. Is the face divided in half, dark on top, white below, or is the face whiter? Then as the bird tracks around and turns and catches the light in different ways, is its back electric blue or is it Kelly green? And then finally on the rump area, is this color that goes from the back to the tail, is it broad here or is it narrow here? So those are the three ways that you tell violet greens and tree swallows apart. So here, even in the brown stage, here's a young tree swallow. You can see the difference in what these look like without even paying any attention to the color. We see that the tree swallow on the left here has its face divided, dark on top, white below. The tree swallow has this whiter face. Then we see this iridescent here, in this case brown, but it would be electric blue if it were an adult, but this is Kelly green. And then the tree swallow has this broad band of color that goes from the back to the tail, and the violet green has it very narrow there. So those are the main differences. So this is the undercarriage of the violet green swallow. You can see even in this picture where you don't see the rump at all and very little of the head, you can still see that white face. All right, now we're going to come to the two swallows that are kind of beigey browny underneath. And the first one we're going to look at is the cliff swallow. So the cliff swallows tend to arrive in Seattle area a little bit later than the other swallows do. They are colony nesters. They build their own nests out of little daubs of mud, which they use to create these basketball-sized gourd-like structures that they plaster onto walls. Flat surfaces really, but kind of rough flat surfaces, and there they nest in colonies. So the cliff swallow, here are the field marks to notice. We start with the forehead, and you see that there's this splash of beige on the forehead, and that will show up at a great distance. That's a diagnostic field mark. Then the crown is this sort of darkish, blackish, brownish color. And then we've got a beige nape and then this chestnut under the chin going all the way past the eye. The under parts here kind of a ecru color of beige, maybe a little bit darker, all the way back to the undertail coverts. And then here we have this beige rump, which is diagnostic, cliff swallow. So here is another view of one, and it's picking up a daub of mud to build its nest. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. But here we start with this beige, so it's kind of a pale splash of color on the forehead. That's different from the barn swallow, which you'll see this is a different color. Dark on the crown here in this picture. It looks sort of bluish. That depends on the light. And then under the chin and around past the eyes, this sort of chestnut color. And then here we have this swirl of beige that goes all the way to the nape. So the nape has a color break from the back of the head to the back. And then here's this sort of beigey color on the undercarriage here. It's, I I don't call this a dirty white. I'll show you a dirty white with the northern rough-winged and bank swallows. To me, it's more of an ecru color, so it's a little bit more colorful than just dirty white. And then here, even here in this picture, you can see the beige rump, which is diagnostic. So here's a cliff swallow. This picture was taken at the IMA building on campus, and it's starting to rebuild its nest from the previous year. Here you can see somebody else's nest is right next door. If you look at every one of these little daubs here, that was brought by this bill with its tiny little bill here, picked up from a mud puddle and brought here and stuck on. And each one of these little lumps here represents a trip by this bird to go and pick up its mud and plaster it on. And eventually what they'll build are these sort of basketball-shaped or sized mud nests that are like gourds. Here's one of the parents inside. And that's how they nest. So if you think about the size of these things, and each one of these little daubs was brought individually, it's a tremendous amount of effort by these birds. But here you can see that beige splash of color on the forehead, dark sort of bluish crown, chestnut under the chin here. The nape is a color break of beige, sort of a beigey ecru color on the underparts all the way to the undertail coverts. And then even here you can see the suggestion of the beige rump, which is diagnostic. So once again, with these beigey browny undercarriage birds, that's what you look for first. And then well, is it a barn swallow or is it a cliff swallow? And you start with the forehead, and the forehead here is diagnostic, this pale beigey splash of color, and then the rump also diagnostic.
Connie, back on that last shot, there's another diagnostic, which is the wings in the air. When they stop to get mud, even though mixed species around the mud puddles at the fill, they always raise their wings up, and their wings are up and fluttering, either to immediately escape or to keep somebody else from landing on top of them.
Or maybe to keep their wings from getting muddy.
Oh, could be. But barns and the others don't do that. Only this cliff swallow is the one I've seen do this.
Okay. All right, so here's is in flight, and you can see those diagnostic field marks, the beige splash of color on the forehead, the color break on the nape, and then this beigey browny rump. Here's another one. You can see that. And another one. Sometimes this back can look pretty blue, along with the back of the head here too. This is what a young one looks like, and you might have trouble identifying this bird if it were by itself, but since they're colony nesters, you're unlikely to see one like this alone. But even here, you can see this splash of color starting to come out on the forehead, dark on the top, beige nape here, color break between the head and the back, beigey brown underneath, and even here in this plumage, you can see the beige rump. Okay, here's the other beigey browny bird on the undercarriage, and that's the barn swallow. So most of the barn swallows that you're going to be seeing in breeding plumage, you will not think that they have a beigey undercarriage at all, because it's sort of this rich chestnut color. But if you see them early in the season, especially if you see the odd barn swallow in January, which we always get a few of them, they are just as beigey under the undercarriage here as those cliff swallows. So that's why I want you to kind of put these two together in the same color category, even though they don't really look like it in this particular plumage. But we'll start here with the forehead, and you see they've got barn swallows have the splash of color also, but it's a richer mahogany kind of color. It's not that ecru beige color that the cliff swallows have. Like the cliff swallows, they have a sort of bluish head, but there's no color break on the nape here. It goes straight to the back, which is sort of blue. It's a different color of blue than the tree swallow's blue, but you wouldn't confuse them anyway, because there's no suggestion of white undercarriage here at all. I just point this out. And then you see this characteristic tail, especially for the males. The outer tail feathers can be quite long. But the size of the tail feathers varies dramatically from one individual to the next and from gender and age and so on. So that is like this one has a little tail here. So size does seem to matter for these barn swallows. So here's one picking up some mud. They do not nest as much in colonies as the cliff swallows do. They can certainly put their nests together, but they can also nest apart. They do not build that gourd-shaped nest. Instead, they bring their little mud daubs and create a kind of messy sort of cup nest consisting of mud mixed in with little pieces of grass and so on. Very messy kind of nest, really. And Bill's pointing out here, I'm sure that it's not got its wings lifted up here like the cliff swallow, but it's holding them straight back. So here we see once again that splash of color, just like with the cliff swallow, but it's a different color. It's a richer brown, blue head, no color break on the nape, and then this kind of beigey browny. This is in breeding plumage, so it's going to be a little bit brighter from the chin all the way down to the undertail coverts. Notice the rump has no trace of beige at all. So here's one in flight, and in flight you can see there's another very, very important plumage mark, and that's these white spots on the tail. And these white spots on the tail show up on the upper side of the tail and also the underside of the tail. They are present in all plumages. It is a diagnostic field mark. So as I said, in January, these barn swallows, if they show up at all, and there's always some of them, can look very, very beige on the undercarriage. This splash of color can look much, much paler than it does in these breeding birds. I have been, even with master birders, in seeing a couple of these flying around at the Phil in January, and they were saying it's a cliff swallow, and I would say, no, it's not. But they didn't believe me, so I shut up after a while. But notice the other differences. So we start here in the, as I say, some of the cliff swallows can kind of look pretty blue, especially in the back here, but none quite so blue as this. But look at the rump here. You see no trace of beige at all. It's straight color from the forehead clear back to where the tail starts. That's diagnostic also. You would have to have a beige rump here and then these tail spots. White tail spots. So this one is one of the ones that's a little bit paler underneath, and I've seen them even paler than that. If you can imagine this color right here on the undercarriage, that's what I am talking about. So, but even on this one, you can see the differences between this barn swallow and the cliff swallow. So the splash of color on the forehead here is much browner. The head is sort of bluish, but there's no color break on the nape. You see a little bit richer color under the chin. That's not always present. Sometimes this can be quite pale also. And then we go all the way back to the undertail coverts. It's the same kind of beigey color, but then you see the tail spots even underneath on the underside of the tail. So if the bird is flying around and he's got his tail all shut up, you're not going to see those spots. But if you follow it around with your binoculars, eventually this bird will spread his tail and then you can see. So this one is quite dark. You can see there's quite a variety here of colors, and that depends on the season and the age of the bird as well, and not to mention the gender. But then this one, has very long trailing tail feathers. Here's one taking off. This one's quite a bright, colorful bird here, but you can see even in this picture these white tail spots that show up. This is barn swallow. And here's a comparison. So you can kind of see, like, you might get mixed up here a little bit if you start just looking at the head. The heads can look a little bit similar, especially when the birds are flying around really fast. But notice there are differences even in the head. So the color of this little spot of color is different. There's a color break on the cliff swallow that is not present on the barn swallow. And we go on down to the rump, and you see this beige rump of the cliff swallow that is not present in the barn swallow, and then the barn swallow has these tail spots regardless of how long these outer tail feathers are, if they're not even present. Whereas with the cliff swallow, there's just nothing there like that at all. So here's a very beigey barn swallow, and you can see how pale it is. You can see that if its tail were together, you wouldn't even see these outer tail feathers. You might not see the white undertail spots either, but if you're patient enough and wait, it will spread its tail and then you can see. So do not be confused. When these swallows take a drink, oftentimes what they'll do is they'll skim the surface like this. They'll come flying in. This picture was taken at Main Pond at Montlake Phil, and they'll flap around and glide around, and then they'll get closer and closer to the water. And as they get close enough to bend their bills down to scoop up water, they will spread their wings out like an angel, and they'll just scoop along with their bills and scoop up water, and they make a kind of a V shape of ripple in the back as they go. It's really one of the most beautiful sights in nature. So I urge you at some point to find a pond that serves as a drinking fountain for these birds and watch them do this. It is funny to watch the first year birds try this out. They know they're supposed to do it, but they're not very good at it, and they can't judge it properly, and so they'll be skimming along, and then they'll lower their bills to do their scooping, and they'll misjudge, and then they'll splat right into the water and have to come back out again and try again. Here is, this is probably in late July, early August picture. So this is the adult. Both adults will take care of the young, coming in with a bug to feed this demanding junior here. Barn swallow. Okay, now we're going to come to the two swallows that have what I call dirty white undercarriage. It is white, but it's not that spanking kind of snow white that the tree swallow and the violet green swallows exhibit. This is the northern rough-winged swallow. It's a bigger swallow than the others, so it's not hugely bigger, but it's noticeably bigger, and so it flaps a little bit more slowly. Doesn't have a whole lot of field marks, so we start here with the face, and you see the whole bird is just sort of brown. The cheek can be a little bit paler, but you're not really going to notice that too much. It's just brown, brown, brown all the way down through the back and onto the rump. But one thing I want you to notice about this brown, this is very important, and that is it is a dull, matte finish brown. It has no trace of iridescence at all. So if the northern rough-winged swallows show up in August and start flying around together with early young tree swallows, you should still be able to tell them apart quite easily because of that lack of iridescence that is in the northern rough-winged swallows. So this is what one looks like from the front, and so you can see that brown face, a little bit paler sometimes in the cheek here, and then notice the undercarriage here. So it's a kind of a dirty white. It's not that spanking snow white of the tree swallow and violet green. Sometimes there can be a wash of pale brown on the throat area, the breast area of these northern rough-winged swallows. The amount and the color shade of that can vary from individual to individual, and that can confuse you with bank swallow, and I'll show you the source of the confusion in a minute here. So pay attention to that. Here's another picture of a northern rough-winged swallow, and you can see this one is a little bit paler under the chin. There's a different shade of brown here by the cheek, but not really noticeable. Otherwise, just a very plain brown bird, basically. A little bit of wash here. This is a little bit darker wash of brown than we see here, which is paler. So that can vary by the individual. And then this sort of dirty white. It's not really dirty white. It's more, let's just say, it might be kinder to say ivory white. These northern rough-winged swallows nest in soft cliffs like this one. They dig out their own holes, even though they've got these little dinky bills. They have to find the right kind of cliff to do this in. It has to be soft enough so that they can dig it out with this puny little bill, and they use their feet and a little bit of their wings too. But it has to be firm enough so that it doesn't collapse. So they could not do this in a sand dune, for example. And that kind of habitat is getting kind of scarce to find here. So they don't nest anywhere that I know of in Seattle, although you'd think that maybe at Discovery Park they ought to be able to nest. Bill, do you know if they ever do that there? Or does anybody go to Discovery Park to do the count there? I haven't heard that they nest there. Usually when I see them, they're spring birds and fall birds. Here's what one looks like in flight, and you can see how very plain it is. So it's got the swallow wings, which are long and pointy. It's got the swallow face, a little dinky bill here, and just generally the right shape and everything, but not too many other field marks here, just very plain brown. But notice how dull the brown is. Northern rough-winged swallow. It's called northern rough-winged because if you look at the wings, there's like roughness on the edges, but you can't see that in the field. That's something you can only see in the hand. I think maybe you can get a little bit of an idea of it here, and little things here coming out too a little bit. So here's what one looks like in flight. Northern rough-winged swallow. Okay, so here we have the undercarriage in flight, and you can see this one does have a wash of pale brown here, but it's not very dark. So pay attention to that. Northern rough-winged swallow. Here's two of them doing something. I'm not sure what. Here's a picture of one of their nests. Mind you, this the parents have scooped this out by themselves with their little bills and feet. And there's the young. These are colony nesters to some degree, but they're not quite as colony nesters as the bank swallow. You can see that with this, there's a little bit of color here. This one, I think, is a young one, but you're not going to see that in the field, I don't think. All right, here's the other swallow that has a kind of an ivory undercarriage of white, or maybe let's call it dirty white. It looks very similar to the northern rough-winged swallow, except there are a couple of field marks that are different. This is the main one. So they all have this collar of brown that goes across the chest, and many of them have a kind of a stab of brown that comes down. That is not present in all birds. The width of this collar, this, I should say, breast band, can vary from bird to bird, and certainly the amount of brown, how dark it is, can vary somewhat too. So it can be kind of a difficult field mark. Here's another picture of one. So you can see this breast band here of brown. Notice that it is a darker shade by quite a factor than any kind of pale wash of brown that the northern rough-winged swallows might exhibit. And then here's that stab of brown going down from that breast band. Otherwise, the face is very brown. The back and wings and rump are all brown, just like the northern rough-winged swallow. In fact, it seems to me like it's always the same shade. But here is another field mark. So you notice that this sort of the dirty white of the chin kind of scoops around in a kind of like a comma of white that goes back behind the eye a little bit. So that is diagnostic as well. So this bird really has, to distinguish it from the northern rough-winged swallow, two field marks to notice: the breast band and this little swoop of white. Here's what one looks like in flight. You can see this one's breast band is much narrower. Here are the two of them together. So on the left we have the northern rough-winged swallow, and you can see that the similarity it's just quite similar. This one's throat is beigeur than the bank swallow on the right, but that can be hard to see as they're flying around. But what I want you to notice is that this paleness of the throat comes swooping around, sometimes as far as the nape when you get a side view like this. That is not present in the northern rough-winged swallow. And then, of course, here's the diagnostic breast band of the bank swallow. Well, those are the two differences. And now we come to our seventh swallow, which is really quite different from all the others. This is the purple martin. It's by far the biggest swallow. It's not purple. It's the males are kind of depending on the light, kind of an indigo. They can almost look black throughout. So they start here with the forehead. You can see there's a bit of a black mask. You are not going to see that too well in the field. And then the same kind of dark color all the way back to the rump and underneath as well. And then it kind of blends in, at least in most lights, with the dark wings as well. So purple martin, these are the biggest swallow. They fly much more slowly than the other swallows do. And I think I will play you, let me see here, how did I do this? I will play you a song here in just a second. Well, so that's one, and then here's another one. And then one more. So before these started nesting at the fill, we would only see them flying over, and not very commonly then either. But now that they're nesting there and nesting elsewhere too, they're more common. So you can listen for that sort of keyer call, and then start looking up and looking around for these purple martins. So purple martins nest in gourds. Here's another picture of the male. You can see that it's iridescent there. The iridescence doesn't always show up, it seems to me, in flight. Sometimes they just look dark. The males are unmistakable though, with these swallow shapes, and then nobody else is dark all over as a blackbird almost, really. Here's another view of one. The females are quite different. See, here we looks a little bit bluish. You wouldn't mistake this for anybody else though. One of the interesting things about this picture here is you can see, although the bill always looks small, it's actually quite a large bill. It's got this enormous gape. So when these birds are catching insects on the fly, they can open their mouths up quite wide, and then those mouths become a scoop to scoop up flying insects. That's how they succeed. Here's one in flight. Here's one going to a gourd. So these birds are cavity nesters, and they've become quite dependent on humans for housing. And they like gourds like this one. We've put up gourds at Montlake Phil. I think there are some gourds on the osprey pole, which were not used last year, but then also some gourds put up on the wood duck poles where the wood duck boxes are in the various lagoons and ponds, and sloughs, I should say. And those were used by purple martins and have been for the last 2 or 3 years, so that's kind of new. There are purple martin gourds other places. In Seattle, I think Discovery Park has some. I'm not sure if Genesee Park, I don't think they do. I think Discovery is the only other neighborhood bird project park that has them, but they're also present at Shilshole, and the Edmonds Pier has some as well.
Yep. And Marymore.
Marymore has some, okay. So here's what, this is a natural gourd, but the gourds here these are artificial plastic gourds. They can be almost anything. Purple martins come back all the way across the country, so they're from the east clear through to the west. For whatever reason, the purple martins in the west seem to prefer gourds, whereas the purple martins in the east like apartment buildings. So go figure. Here's what one looks like underneath. Purple martin. So the males are unmistakable. The females are a little bit more difficult to tell apart. So they're they're not as iridescent and dark on the top, and then underneath they're this very dirty kind of grayish from the chin all the way back down to the undertail coverts here. So if there's one by itself, like here, sometimes, especially with the younger ones, there'll be a kind of a band here. They can look very puzzling, I think. But you're not likely to see one by itself like this, except every once in a while you can. I remember there was one perched on a wire at Bowerman Basin one time, and it really puzzled me. I had to look at that bird for a long time before it finally occurred to me that maybe it was a swallow, and a purple martin at that. Here's another view of the female. So she's not as well, she's got this sort of dirty speckly from the chin down to the band here, and then dirty white below to the undertail coverts. Here she is bringing a bug. Here there are two of them together. Here's what a young one looks like, very similar to the female. Purple martins. All right, now we're going to discuss two swifts. This is the more common swift, the Vaux's swift. Some people call it Vaux swift. It's spelled V-A-U-X''S. I guess if you like French, you're going to say Vaux, but most of the birders I know, including me, say Vaux's swift. So these are small birds. They're a little bit smaller than, at least in the body, compared to swallows, but otherwise kind of in the same ballpark, I guess you could say. It's said that they look like flying cigars. So they have small heads, bulky bodies, kind of rounded bellies here, and then the tail just sort of is short and kind of just ends. So it makes them look like flying cigars. They like all swifts, they have these characteristic long wings with the bend of the arm closer to the body than swallows have, and the wing shape is different. So I'm gonna tell you how to tell swifts and swallows apart. That can be a little bit tricky, but once you get onto it, you won't confuse them. So the swallow wing is more isosceles triangle shaped. I'll show you a picture of comparison in a minute here. The wing of a swift is different. It's not as broad, close to the body, and then it tapers much more quickly and gets thinner, more narrow, I should say, to a point. And there's usually it's almost like a curve of the wing here. So the net effect of the way that the arm bone is smaller, the way that the wings attach, and the outer leading edge of the wings all contribute to a different pattern of flight for swifts compared to swallows. Swifts have very stiff winged flapping. They're not going to pull their wings in close to their bodies on the upstroke the way that swallows tend to do. It's much stiffer overall. So they look like they're kind of got these long sort of oars sticking out on either side of their body. And like oars that are quite stiff, they're not bendable really too much. So it gives them a different kind of flight pattern. And I'll show you a picture of that as best I can. I'm not going to promise very much here. I couldn't find a good picture, so I got a bad picture. So here comes, this is a Vaux's swift, and there it is. That's it. So this will loop through. So when it flaps, it looks like it's almost fluttering, but you see it's not bringing the wings close into its body on the up flap. It's keeping the wings out all the time. So it gives it the kind of a fluttering flight that the swallows just don't have. It's a straighter flap. If you can see the wing shape also as it's flying like this, it's very thin and curved in the front, in the leading edge. The wings do not kind of flow backwards the way they do in a swallow. If you think of a Sumier painting, for example, and how the end of the stroke kind of flows to the end, that's a swallow. Swift doesn't do that. It's more, it keeps them out more straight. Sometimes the undercarriage of these Vaux's swifts can look kind of pale. I wouldn't worry about that. Instead, what you should look at is that kind of straight-winged, fluttery flight with, as you notice, some soaring in between, but swallows do that too. But the wing shape is real different. It's not as broad here where it joins the body, and it's very narrow across the rest of the wing. And then, at least insofar as Vaux's swifts are concerned, the tail usually just kind of ends on a straight across, and it looks like a flying cigar. So here's another view of one.
Connie, is my impression correct that I usually see them above the swallows?
Um, yeah, no, I wouldn't say so. They can. I've seen them both above and below. So
Yeah, I think most frequently I'm looking straight up and they're above the swallows, but that may just,
I don't
right.
think so. That may be true for what you see sometimes, but I wouldn't say that's a very good indication
Oh, I
because
agree. Not a diagnostic, but a good place to look for them is they seem to be correlated with swallows and for me, usually above the flock. So that's where I expect to see them. But yeah, you also see them single or pairs or elsewhere.
well, and sometimes they're below the swallows too. So it can.
Okay,
It
so
can.
pretty much they're above or below swallows and with or without swallows then. So, okay, that's diagnostic.
It doesn't make any sense at all. I with some of these positionings of birds, the tendency can kind of start making you think about where to look or to think about what identification you want to make. But it's a tendency. So what you're talking about is a tendency as well. So with warblers, for example, Townsend's warblers tend to forage in the upper canopy, and orange crown warblers tend to forage much lower in the canopy. But you can see Townsend's warblers on the ground too. So with the birds do tend to divide up the resource, no matter what it is, and Vox's swifts are in competition with swallows for flying insects. And you might be right, Bill, that they might try to go after the ones a little bit higher in the sky, at least for a while. So that it wouldn't hurt to kind of look that way, as long as you're
Yeah.
aware that they can be elsewhere too.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure you've blown me out of the saddle here. So
All right,
I'll be crying after class.
that's good. All right, so here we have the flying cigar again, Vox's swift. Notice the tail is straight across, just like a chewed up cigar. Here is what they like to do in migration, or I'm not sure what they do when they're just nesting. They don't do this, but in the fall, this is a very typical sight. This picture was taken at the Monroe Chimney, where in late August and early September, these Vox's swifts will gather by the thousands. They'll come in from all over the region and start swirling around like a giant cyclone above this chimney. And then at some mysterious signal at dusk, they'll just plunge right in and cling on the inside of the chimney. So I'm going to take time to show you that because it's fun to watch.
It's almost sunset when they start showing up. A small flock of people here to witness a much bigger flock of birds.
This is the spot where swifts come to keep warm at night.
Every September in Monroe, what may be the largest gathering of Vox's swifts in North America swarms into this chimney every night.
You look in the sky and it just starts to fill with birds, and at first you're like, there's no way that there's going to be that many birds, and then all of a sudden they just keep going and going and going.
Nick French's job is to count, or attempt to count, how many birds fly in.
It's generally you count in hundreds. Some folks use clickers. Usually start at ones and then you work your way up, and then when they just start going in, it's fast and furious. Here they go.
The birds begin to swirl in one direction and funnel into the chimney head first.
It's mesmerizing almost.
Watchers can see the inside of the chimney too. A camera streams live as thousands of birds layer themselves inside like shingles. Vox's swifts can't perch because of the way their feet are shaped. And when they can't find a hollow tree to roost in, an old brick chimney will do. This one, atop a Monroe Elementary School, was almost torn down for earthquake safety until local Audubon societies successfully rallied to save it. Every year, there's a special gathering called Swift Night Out to celebrate the return of these birds.
I want everyone in Monroe to know and love these little birds.
The last swift, he had to make some circles, has to check to make sure everybody's found the chimney, and then he went in and the whole crowd cheered.
Yes!
The night's count? Somewhere around 6,000. Yay birds, indeed.
So that's Swift Night Out. If you haven't been to see that, you should make a point to do that. I did ask Larry one time when the Swifts all go in, because they go in so fast, and the chimney's not that big. Do the first ones go to the bottom of the chimney and then they fill up the chimney from the top to from the bottom to the top, or do the first ones stop at the top and then the other ones have to find their perches down at the bottom? So is it from the bottom up or from the top down? And Larry said, I don't know. I never thought about that. So he looked at the camera for a few times and he said what they do is they go to the middle first and then they fill to the bottom and the top. So now you know. This is not the only chimney where they do this, but it's the best known one and the most stable that I know of in our area. So here's another view. You can see this picture here, how stiff they fly. Their wings are. All right, so here is a comparison of the wing shape of a tree swallow on the left and a Vox's swift on the right, and you can see what I'm talking about here. The tree swallow's wing joins the body in a much broader length here. You can see that compared to the swift here. So the swift's wings kind of end here, and then there's a lot of swift behind the wing, not so much with the swallow. But the shape of the wing of the swallow is different too. It's more of an isosceles triangle, whereas with the swift it's just more narrow all the way to from the armpit clear to the tip, and you get this sense with the swallow that it's like a scimitar-shaped curve, like a crescent curve here. That's because of the way the bones are shaped, and with the swallow, it's not so much. So swallows can hold their wings out straight. They don't have to be bent back like this. In other words, picture this first primary here a little bit more forward, but the wing shape would still be more of an isosceles triangle shape compared to the Vox's swift. There is another swift that I want you to be aware of. This one would be much more uncommon, but you should know it anyway because they do come here, and I want you, when you're looking at swifts, to be sure that you're looking at Vox's swifts as opposed to looking at this guy, which is the black swift. So the black swift is our biggest swift. It's much bigger than the Vox's swift. But it doesn't stay with us for long. So these birds are one of the latest migrants. They usually don't show up in our area till late May or even early June. They come from Brazil in a flock, and they'll pass through the lowlands in spring and then also in fall. But where they're really headed is to the foothills and mountains where they nest behind waterfalls. So they were such a mysterious bird that it's only recently that we've discovered that they do winter in Brazil. Before that, nobody knew exactly where they went. It's not possible just to see them in spring and fall migration, however, because like all the swifts, they hunt for insects in the air, and when the mountains get socked in with fog or with rain, these black swifts will come down to the lowlands to forage for a while and then fly back to the mountains to feed their young. So what I do in June, clear through to early July when I'm at the fill, if I look at the mountains at the foothills, and if they're socked in with fog or rain, that's when I hope to see the black swifts come down and fly over the fill. So it's a little bit easier to spot these the closer you are to the foothills. Marymount gets more sightings of black swifts than we do, and Marblemount, they're pretty regular there, but we do get them too, so I want you to be aware of that. And but don't look for them very early in the morning. It takes them a while to get down here. So usually around maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. That's on cloudy days in the mountains. That's when I'm hoping to see black swifts down here. So how do you tell them apart from Vox's swifts? If the Vox's swifts are flying along with the black swifts, it's quite easy to tell them apart because the black swifts are so much larger, but you don't get that lucky very often. So, and you can't tell size if these guys are just flying around by themselves, but there are other field marks that will tell you. The first thing to look for is the disproportionate length of these wings. It's disproportionately bigger wings, much longer than the Vox's swift. It's much more of a scimitar shape, so the curvature is much more obvious in these black swifts than in the Vox's swifts. It's present in the Vox's swifts, but more distinct in the black swifts. But the diagnostic field mark is right back here. So black swifts have a forked tail, and that's so different from the Vox's swift where the tail just sort of ends like the bit-off piece of a cigar. Now, you might not think that you could see this little tail on this little bird, because even though it's bigger than the Voxus swift, it's not a big bird. And usually they do fly up high, though I've had one fly almost over my head one time and look me straight in the eye. And you might think, well, how am I ever going to see something like this? And the answer is you can. It shows up surprisingly well. So do look for that. So like the Voxus swift, the young ones or the females can have a little bit lighter beige or brown or gray under the carriage, but that's not something that is going to be very helpful. Instead, you want to look at this. So if these birds are flying with their tails all closed up, then they're going to look like it's a straight edge going across. So you have to follow them with your binoculars for a while and watch them to see if they hold their tails like this. So when the tails are spread out, like here, you're not going to see that forkedness either, so that's not going to be very helpful. And here you can see it's just about ready to put his tail together, so that can be hard to see. But if you track them a while, you will eventually see them like that, and that is the diagnostic field mark. Black swifts are also much slower at flapping because their wings are so much bigger. So the flapping pattern is not that sort of buzzsaw, almost like a bumblebee that you saw with the Voxus swift video that I showed you. It's a more leisurely kind of flap. And black swifts tend to soar a little bit more than Voxus swifts. That's a tendency, though, so you can get fooled because sometimes Voxus swifts will soar for longer than you might think. But in general, the black swifts do soar a lot more than the Voxus swifts do. And usually what the pattern is you look up in the sky, and these guys usually tend to stay kind of high, and you see these swifts and they look a little bit calmer than the normal Voxus swifts, and that draws your eye, and then you start following them around with your binoculars to look at the tail. And if you look away, then they disappear. So where do they go? I don't know. They're foraging all over, and they can be present for a while and then just gone. But if you're patient, they tend to come back too, because they are going around in circles and so on, trying to forage for food before they head back up to the mountains. So don't be too disappointed if they disappear from view, because they're likely to come back in another few minutes. Black swift. All right, so that takes care of the swifts, and now we're going to get into the thrushes. And of course, the first and most common thrush is this one. This is the American robin. And if you think you know robins, then as an exercise, sometime what you ought to do is not look at a book or a picture or anything. Just close your eyes and then write down all the field marks of a robin from the bill down to the tail. And you might be surprised at how little you know the field marks, because I've done this so many times with my classes, and I usually get all of the field marks right, but then I get down to the feet, and I always can't remember. Are they sort of pinkish, grayish, or blackish feet? But it's an exercise that's useful to do for two purposes. One, it encourages you to look at every field mark of a bird, which is good practice to do that in case you should dig up a rarity or something like that at some point. Two, it's a good exercise to do that also to encourage you to look at every bird. This is a dictum of Dennis Paulson's, look at every bird. And what he means by that is not just put your binoculars on every bird, but really look at each bird. What that does for you is not just help you to identify the bird. So when you're out counting on the neighborhood bird project counts, yeah, you count the bird and then you count the next bird and so on. But take a little time to do more than that. Take a little time to observe the bird also and find out what is it doing and how is it holding itself, and is it moving quickly or slowly? Is it what's it up to today? Like this one, for example, it looks fat. But it's not fat, it's puffed out. So we're looking at a bird that's probably trying to stay warmer. And it's just kind of fun to do that. In the case of these robins, you can also tell the females apart from the males by the color of their hoods here. So the males are black and the females are kind of a charcoaly gray. So we're going to start here at the bill. It's a robin bill, I should say. It's like I call it a utility bill, meaning it's a bill that doesn't have a particularly specific shape. It's not adapted for a particular task, like a woodpecker would have kind of a chisel bill, or a spoonbill would have a spoon buffoon bill at the end. Nope, this one's it's pretty robust. It's got a point at the end, a little bit of a hook, but not much of one. It's pretty symmetrical based on when I'm talking about the width of the upper mandible and the width of the lower mandible. When you see a bird that has a bill like this, you're looking at a bird that's kind of a generalist, and that really does apply to most of what robins do. So oftentimes these birds that have bills like this, crows are another one that do, and so are jays, usually these birds are omnivorous. They lead a generalized lifestyle. But other than that, so we start here and sort of a yellowish utility bill. Forehead is black or charcoal gray all the way back to the back of the head where it blends into the back. We'll see broken eye ring of white, very broken, kind of a blackish lore. The chin is beautiful with these sort of zebra stripes of black and white. And then, of course, the red breast all the way down to the undertail coverts, which are then white. So this is this beautiful kind of rufous color. Here's a female, so you can see her head, the hood of her head here is more of a charcoal gray blending into the back, and then her breast also the same as the male. Utility bill here, broken eye ring, stripes on the chin. The undertail coverts it's not just the white, but also kind of a whitish belly. Here's another male. You can see the color break between the black here of the head and then the more grayish brownish of the back here. American robin. I'm not going to play you the robin song today. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until we cover tanagers and black-headed grosbeaks, which have similar songs to the robin, and I'll play all three of them at once, and then you can compare them. Here's another female. You can see the same field mark. So utility bill, not always yellow. Grayish head, almost the same color as the back. This beautiful white and black striped throat, broken eye ring, rufous all the way back down to the belly, and then white undertail coverts. No wing bars. Here's another female. So it can be fun to see a robin in the field and then try to figure out, is it a male or a female? That's fun to do. Like, what would you say that one was? I think that's a female, don't you? And look, this one has pinkish grayish legs, honestly. The undertails are not, or I mean the underwings are not too much to write home about, but they do have this beautiful rufous color that goes a little bit up past the armpits. Here's one in flight. Really, a most beautiful bird. If they weren't so common, we would pay more attention to them. Which is a weird human trait that we prefer the rarities. I've never understood that. These the wing shape of a robin is once more an indication of what a generalist it is. Pretty broad wing. You can see how much wing is attached to the body here. And then if you kind of squint your eyes shut, the wing tips are rounded. They're not pointy like a gull or a peregrine falcon. When you see this kind of broad wing like this, it's relatively short and rounded at the tips, you're looking at a wing that is adapted for maneuverability. And indeed, robins are extremely maneuverable. Think about how robins come plunging at 30 miles an hour into a camellia bush, which has lots of twigs, and they never seem to break their wings. Well, that's their maneuverability. They're incredible birds, really. I want you to study this picture in flight because this is very typical. So robins will spend a lot of time gliding like this with their wings close to their bodies, but they do not fold up their wings in the same way that a finch does. With a finch, they would show a bullet shape, but this shape that the robins have instead is almost like a box. So the shoulders are part of the box here. They're not close in, they're not bent down, they're kind of spread out a little bit to make that box shape, and then notice the wings are not all folded up, so that you get this like almost a rectangle shape here. That is very typical of a robin. So you can see that even in very poor light, the bird flying away from you. Nobody else really has this shape. This is what a juvenile robin looks like. So they're very spotty on the front. This plumage is not held for very long. but you can see this usually in, I'm going to say, late July or so. Here's another one. This is what tells you that indeed this robin is a thrush, because thrushes have these spots on their chest. So yes, this is a thrush. Unlike all the other thrushes that I know of, robins are not shy. You might call them the Bill Clinton of the thrush family. What they often do is when they fly into some place, they don't necessarily fly right into cover. Oftentimes they'll fly to the very tippy top of a tree and perch there and bob their tail a little bit and look around. And you think, well, why are they doing that? It's like they're advertising that they're there. And why doesn't a peregrine falcon just come and swoop them up? Unknown, really. I've often thought that possibly they taste bad. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but there was a thrush, I think in Thailand or someplace like that. It's been a long time since I've thought about this, where an ornithologist was banding one, and he put his lips to part of the bird while he was trying to hold it for the banding process, and then his lips went numb. And he realized, oh, there's poison in these feathers, and that was a kind of a thrush. So I've often wondered if these robins just taste bad, and that's why they can be a little bit bolder than other birds. So
You know they eat worms.
yes, that's not all they eat. They're omnivorous, so they'll eat berries, and they'll peck at crab apples. And they eat worms. Oftentimes, people have thought that when they kind of tip their heads down to look for a worm, that they're listening, but that's not what they're doing. They're actually looking to see a part of a worm sticking out so they can grab it. No, they're not really listening. Here is a much shyer thrush, and this is a neotropical migrant. This is the Swainson's thrush. A little bit of a latecomer, not as late as some migrants, certainly not as late as the black swifts. It comes in probably the third week or so, maybe even to the second week of third week of April. That would be very early for one. Clear through to the second week of May or so is when they start arriving. They're very shy. They do not like to be looked at. Beautiful birds, though, really. Oftentimes, if you see one and you flush it, it will flush not very high, but into deep cover, kind of at head height or so, and then just sit there still and hope that you don't really see it. That's quite common for this bird to do this. So what are the field marks of a Swainson's thrush? There's only one bird that you're going to confuse a Swainson's thrush with, and that's the hermit thrush, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So Swainson's thrushes are a summer resident bird. They come up here from the neotropics to breed. Hermit thrushes are more of a winter bird. They're year-round in our state. They come down from the highlands to the lowlands in the wintertime. That's the best time to see a hermit thrush. And then as spring approaches, they'll move up into the foothills. So there's not a whole lot of overlapping time to confuse these two birds, but there is a window of about 3 or 4 weeks when you really have to know these two birds and tell them apart. And they look so similar that can be a little bit challenging to do, but not impossible. So let's go through the field marks of a Swainson's thrush. We start here with this utility bill. This one looks like it's a bicolored bill, but that is not a good diagnostic. It's variable, but the shape of the bill is very robin-like. So is the head and body. You can kind of see that. We start here, and we see it's got a bit of an eye ring, a little bit of a supercilium here. That is not diagnostic. You look at the throat and down through the breast and so on, and you see that it's got spots. The spots are kind of smudgy with a wash of beige in the background, and then that beige sort of fades out as you get down through the belly and then into the undertail coverts. There can be a wash of beige, or I'm going to say like almost a yellowish brown in the cheek, but that varies from bird to bird. No wing bars at all. And then the color from the forehead down through the back and onto the wing coverts and all the way back down to the tail is pretty much the same color. That is diagnostic. So it's a kind of maybe an olivey brown. You can see that it changes a little bit in the rump and into the tail, but not very much. In the hermit thrush, this change in color here is much more enormous, so that is a diagnostic difference with these Swainson's thrushes. Now, some of the bird books will tell you that the spots of a Swainson's thrush compared to the spots of a hermit thrush are smudgier. I do not find that to be a reasonable field mark. There's just too much variation, and I don't go by that. So I wouldn't recommend that you do that either. But here you can see this individual has more of a wash of beige on the cheek a little bit, and beige here, beige wash on the throat down through the breast, and then turning more to white in the undertail coverts. But look at the color from the head all the way down through the back and into the tail, all the way to the end of the tail. It's pretty much the same color. That is diagnostic for Swainson's thrushes. Of course, the other diagnostic is the song, and the Swainson's thrush song is really quite lovely. I don't know if I have one here. Just a second. I know I've got a hermit thrush. Yeah, here we go. So notice it starts out with a few introductory notes and then it goes up the scale. That is diagnostic. So that's the Swainson's thrush. One of the interesting things, just kind of as a sidelight here, Swainson's thrushes are common across most of North America, and they all winter down from Central America a little bit farther south into the northern part of South America. But when they migrate north, they split off, and some of them come up the Pacific Flyway as far as BC, and the others go more up the Central Flyway and stop along the way to nest wherever they find suitable habitat. So it looks like they're splitting into two species, and probably someday they will be different enough so that they do that, because they do mix when they get down into Central America and their wintering grounds and so on. All the Swainson's thrushes kind of get to the same area, but they don't interchange there, and of course they don't breed there. So when breeding season comes upon them and they migrate, they split again, and our version comes up to the Pacific Northwest to breed and on into BC, and the more eastern version does its thing farther east. They do come together in breeding time in one small area in BC, but that's the only place they do that. So there's very little gene exchange. Huh? I'm sorry? Someone, oh well. So there's very little gene mixture, and probably eventually that will lead to a split, but not right now. So we're kind of, this is a snapshot in time, in geological time, and we don't see these speciations because we're too short-lived, but I believe that that's one that's going on right now. Here's another view of a Swainson's thrush, and you can see that this one has more of a yellowish wash, a yellow beige on the chest than the other ones did. But once again, we're looking at the same color clear through down to especially the rump here. Tail looks a little bit red, but not too much. Here's another view of the back of one.
Yeah, these guys made it all the way up to South Alaska, up in South Central Alaska. They were my quintessential bird of spring, was to hear Swainson's thrush.
Oh yeah, that's good to know. So, and here's another one. Here you can see this one has a lot of smudgy dots on its chest. But as I say, I just don't find that to be a very useful field mark. There's another one. Not much to this could be a very pretty pattern, but I don't see it too much in the wild. It's hard to see. Hard to see these birds in general. Okay, here is the hermit thrush. So this is not a neotropical migrant. It's more of an altitudinal migrant. It comes down to the lowlands in the winter and then goes up higher in the foothills and mountains in the summer to breed. Notice it looks so much like the Swainson's thrush, but here's the main difference right here. So we start at the bill, and it's got that same kind of color of brown, very plain face, dots on the chest, no wing bars, same color brown on the back, but halfway down the back, just before you get to the rump, it starts to shift into a different color, a much more rufous brown, and that continues from the rump all the way to the tail. That is the diagnostic difference between these two thrushes. So here you can see the color change is a little bit more gradual, but by the time you get into this area, we're into kind of a rufous brown. A Swainson's thrush would never have this. Here's another view of one. This is why I don't like these dots. See, these are pretty smudgy dots. I don't think that's a good field mark, although the books say that it is. Now here you see one, and you can see these dots are a lot more distinct. But still, I say that's not what you want to look for. This is what you want to look for back here. And then, of course, the song is really totally different. Some people say this is the most beautiful song of all birds. Same song, different pitches. Really beautiful. So, and totally different from the Swainson's. As you heard, the Swainson's has a few introductory notes and then goes up the scale. So there's one other thing I wanted to show you with these hermit thrushes, which I've never seen in the field, but someday I will. It's my mission in life. It's called foot quivering. So Swainson's don't do this, but hermit thrushes do. Notice it's wiggling its foot, quivering it. And that seems to be a way to encourage grubs and worms to get curious and come up and see what's causing that. Maybe it's rain that they need to get out of their holes for. And they come up, and then the hermit thrush grabs them. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this, but now you have a mission too if you haven't.
It looks like he's about to get a mole.
I know.
The whole ground move there, that's got to be a mole underneath.
I think that might be a little big for him.
Yeah.
So make that your mission too. Foot quivering. All right. It's another view of a hermit thrush. You can see that color change on the tail back there. And here. Now, if this is all you're going to see, then I would say that you might not be able to make a clear identification. If this were a bird in let's say Nisqually, and it's July, I think it would be pretty safe to say that's a Swainson's, but I don't like to identify birds that way by season and geography. I prefer to do it by field marks, and we're not looking at the back of this bird. Same here. All right, here's the other thrush that we're going to cover tonight, and this is the varied thrush. So this is a much bigger bird than the other thrushes. When I first saw these in my early days of birding, I thought of this as a souped-up robin, but of course it's not. So we start with a bill. This is one of those utility bills again, and then we got these beautiful stripes on the head, dark orange, dark cheek patch, orange under the chin, and then orange kind of fading to undertail coverts of white, and then orange on the wings, wing bars, and patches of orange all over the place, and grayish back. Here's another one. The males have a dark color on this part, on these black stripes. The females are more charcoal gray like the back. That's the way you tell them apart. And this beautiful like pectoral of necklace or so of black. Here's what it looks like in the front. Just absolutely beautiful bird. Very shy. My experience is that if you see one and it sees you and it doesn't like you very much, which it usually doesn't, it flies away and then does not come back. So Motley Field gets these in the wintertime, not in big numbers. They're actually kind of common thrush, so you can see them almost anywhere in the lowlands. They'll come to your yard too. Where's a really reliable place to see them? Almost anywhere, really, I guess. They like the forest, though. A good place is South Whidbey Island State Park. There's a lot of them there. Here's the female. You can see she's got a little bit paler on the crest and her cheek patch and so on. Varied thrush. There's a male, a little bit darker. They're like other thrushes. They're omnivorous. So this one's eating some, looks like crab apples, but they'll eat worms and grubs too. They have a beautiful song. I don't know if I have one here. So it's a two-tone song. It starts usually with a high drawn-out note and then followed by a lower drawn-out note. Usually those two notes are spaced a little bit closer together than this guy. Really pretty. For a two-note song, it's got to be one of the most beautiful ones in the wild, I think. Here's a female. See how the color on her head is matching the color on her back. Here's one going after some berries. Now we come to something that looks like a thrush, but is not even closely related to a thrush. This is the American pipit. Pipits they tend to be winter birds here in the Seattle area, although they can be seen in migration as well. They nest up north in Alaska in talus caves, little crevices in the talus. They prefer, when they're down here, they prefer grassy areas for the most part, grassy fields, open areas. So they look very robin-like, but they're not. They've got this sort of utility bill, and then kind of streaky on the top here, and then this beautiful beige supercilium, and then a beige whisker that comes around, beige throat, beige wash, all the way down to the undertail coverts, which are then this very kind of ecru color. Streaks here, not really dots, on the chest that kind of fade off as they get to the belly, but are present on the flanks here, and then very plain back, the suggestion of a couple of wing bars here, and then a diagnostic. All of these parts here, especially this area, those are diagnostic, but the real diagnostic field mark is white outer tail feathers, which you can just make out here on this folded up bird, but we'll see another picture of it. They tend to stay on the ground. I almost never see them perched up high. I did see one perched in a low tree one time at Montlake Phil, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It's the first and only time I've ever seen one perched like that. Usually they stay on the ground, and if they flush, they just fly up and fly away. As they fly away, they make a kind of pipit call, which gives them their name. So this is not the only pipit in North America, but it's the only one we get. This is the American pipit. In breeding plumage, the streaks on their chest tend to get a little bit wider and darker. So this one is approaching breeding plumage. This one is more of a winter bird. This one is more of a breeding plumage bird. When they walk, they kind of walk like pigeons. They thrust their head forward and back, forward and back, forward and back as they stride along. This one is not breeding. So I think I have a pipit call here. No, I don't. So let's see if I can find a pipit on this one. Oh, I have to go way up here. Okay, we'll do a flight song. So that's supposed to sound like pipit, pipit, pipit. So that's the American pipit song, or actually flight call. Here's the back, very plain, really. Hint of streaks on the back. It's a very beige bird. Here's one. This picture was taken at Montlake Phillip Main Pond. Another one. Here in flight, you can see these white outer tail feathers. That is diagnostic. There aren't that many birds that have white outer tail feathers. And in flight, it's got just a suggestion of Townsend solitaire, doesn't it, with these wing bars the way they are. But you see the head here is with these beige supercilium and then this beige whisker. You couldn't mistake that. Here's a couple of them in flight, and you can see those outer tail feathers, white. And here's one underneath. And here's a comparison of American pipit on the left and Swainson's thrush on the right. And you can see that bill-wise and body-wise, they look quite similar. But when you really start looking at them, there's not a whole lot that they have in common. The pipit definitely has this beige supercilium. Swainson's thrush can have a little bit of a hint of one, but it stops by the eye here, whereas this one goes all the way back almost to the nape. And then this beautiful curving whisker of beige on the pipit that does not exist on the Swainsons. And then notice the spots here. The Swainsons definitely are spots, even if they're smudged spots, but the pipits are more streaks. And the beige wash is much more apparent from the chin all the way down to the undertail coverts. Whereas if there is any beige wash at all on the Swainson's thrush, it might just be in the breast area and oftentimes not there either. Also, the pipit has wing bars and the Swainson's thrush does not. And then the back is completely different. That's kind of suggestion of darkish streaks on a grayish back with a pipit, but the Swainson's thrush doesn't have any marks there at all. So a lot of differences really when you start to look. All right, this is our last bird of the night, and this is European starling. It's not closely related to any of the birds that I've been showing you. It is a non-native bird introduced in the 1800s in the East. 30 birds started out, and now we've got billions of these birds. They don't directly compete in most areas with our native birds, but they do compete in one area that's very important, and that is these are cavity nesters like so many of our birds. And these European starlings are very aggressive around their cavities, so they take over cavities that are kind of scarce anyway in suburban and urban areas because you have to have snags of one sort or another, old woodpecker holes and the like. And oftentimes people will get rid of that kind of habitat if they have something like that in their yard. They don't like to have snags. So the starlings will tend to take those over and drive out the native birds, and that's kind of a bad thing for our native birds. So let's look at the field marks here. If we're disregarded and if these were really native, we might really think a lot of these starlings, because if you put aside I'm going to say my prejudices, it's really quite lovely. I find myself having sort of astonishing myself that I would say that. So in breeding plumage, yellowish bill, it's a little bit more crow-like than our thrushes, so a little bit more robust. And then very iridescent feathers from the crown all the way down through the nape, and then dark down the belly, but iridescently dark. And then on the wings and back, these little white dots going all the way down to the rump and in the undertail coverts too. So here's one at its cavity with its nest. And here's one leaving. You can see how the white dots are just kind of everywhere. There's another picture of one. In flight, they have a characteristic shape. So the wings are they're not isosceles triangles. They're like right triangles. So leading edge is kind of the angular part, and then the trailing edge is more straight. And the net effect is these wings look like flying right triangles, more so than any other bird I know. And these birds do soar a lot. They don't hold their wings against their bodies after flapping when they're going to rest in flight, the way so many of our finches, thrushes, and woodpeckers do. They soar with their wings held out like this. It's a very characteristic shape. So here's another one in breeding plumage, and still another one. Here's that shape I was telling you about. This is, they tend to lose some color in the winter time, so they lose all that iridescence and so on. Let's have another look at this. It's just more dotty, I guess you could say, and the bill color goes from bright yellow to kind of dull, and they like to associate with blackbirds a lot. They like to forage for worms and whatnot in pretty large flocks in the winter time. This is what a juvenile starling looks like. It can be a hard bird to identify because it is so very plain. Here's another one just coming into adult plumage here with its dots. But otherwise, not a whole lot going on here. Just a very brown bird, palish brown everywhere. And then this bill, which is so robust. The forehead always looks flat, like they haven't got much brain in there. You can see that in this picture too. That's kind of characteristic as well. But I can tell you that in August or so, sometimes these can be confusing birds till you really start looking at the especially the bill shape and the head shape. This is a young one, and it's got like so many of these young birds, a stripiness in the underparts in front. So that is my presentation for this week, and now I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and we'll take some questions if you have any.
There was a question in the chat earlier on. Louise asked, where do bank swallows nest as opposed to rough-winged?
Bank swallows nest in colonies, and I don't know anymore where the best place is. Bill, do you know of a colony? There's no place near here, I don't think.
No, we've only found one colony, and that's over in the middle of the state. And it's just a little dump pile of dirt beside a railroad track, and that's about a 10-foot pile, and that's the only place we know to find bank swallows reliably.
There used to be a colony kind of in the going toward Marble Mount, but I think that's been abandoned. There was kind of a bridge over a little stream. It's kind of hard to describe. I'm not sure what the Birding in Washington book would say about that.
Yeah, it's never been a quest of ours. We always found this one and tend to return to it. But let me just add, at the moment, if you want to brush up on your swallows, yesterday there were between 3 observers who you may know, estimating 300 to 600 swallows at the Phil. Today, when I was there, it was 100 plus for sure of mixed species. So if you want to go down and practice your banking swallows, it's a good spot to do it right now on a sunny day between storms and hail.
Right. Any other questions?
I might also mention this comment from Nancy that says when you were offering the sounds earlier about stellars and scrub jays, that stellars demand and scrub jays ask.
Oh, I think that's kind of a stretch. It's an interesting phenomenon because the scrub jays have come up from California, and in Northern California, where the Steller's jays and scrub jays mix more than they do here, the Steller's jays, I'm going to get this wrong. The scrub jays, I think, are more aggressive. Up here, the Steller's jays are a little more aggressive. But that just might be a difference in population numbers. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how these two species get along once the scrub jay numbers start to go up, as they are bound to do. It's just they're in both cases they're very wonderful birds. So they like to hang out. The scrub jays hang out best seen in Ballard on telephone wires. That's the most reliable place that I know of to see them.
Oh, I'd like to say that this weekend, Connie is going to go be leading a citizen census at Cheesty. And I have often had trouble on these censuses telling the difference between Coopers and Sharpies and Flickers and Pileateds. And so while Connie was preparing her test, I prepared a test too, going to the Macaulay Library and getting these 4 species. And so next time, instead of Connie testing us, I'll test Connie. And I think this will definitely challenge her. I would do it right now, but I think it would take a little while here. So it's going to be revenge of the testes next time.
Ruh-roh. Mind you, I say over and over again that I'm terrible at bird songs. So, but don't be afraid to make mistakes when you're out there in the field. Everybody does. Even the very best birders will make mistakes now and then. So humility is something that birding teaches you. And that's all for tonight, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Connie.
What's next week?
I don't know.
We agree.
I think it might be warblers, but I'm not sure. I have to double check that.
If we're the raptors and owls are going to be last, right? The change
Right.
last.
Yeah, we missed that last week due to technical difficulties, and so we're going to tack that on at the very end.
Flycatchers and various
Flycatchers and
land
miscellaneous
birds.
land birds.
Flycatchers
And various land birds.
and various land birds. That's a broad category.
Great blue herons or something.
No,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Spoonbills. Yeah.
it should be fun. I love flycatchers.
Thank you, Connie.
All
All
right.
right. Thanks, guys. Good night.